I should have known from the moment my daughter the small velvet box between two fingers, as if it might smudge her polished manicure, that this gift would not land the way I imagined. Mum, she said with a half laugh. Is this supposed to be a joke? The room fell into an uneasy hush before small chuckles started bubbling up. Her husband grinned into his wine. Her teenage boy hid a snort behind his soda can. Her friends exchanged looks, the kind people share when they're trying not to laugh but failing politely. I stood there, still holding my breath, still holding on to hope. Inside the box lay a delicate necklace gold chain, deep green stone resting quietly like a memory breathing its last. But Nora, my only daughter, saw none of that. She wrinkled her nose. Mum, seriously, where did you get this? Some yard sale from the 1950s? More laughter. I kept my face still. I'd mastered the kind of smile that keeps your heart from spilling onto the floor. It was Nora's 34th birthday. The house was full of her friends from work, the new yoga instructor she bragged about, neighbors she wanted to impress. She looked radiant, confident, put together, every hair in place. I stood in the corner like a guest who had arrived by mistake, holding something that meant the world to me, and nothing at all to her. It's kind of adorable. In an antique, spooky prop kind of way, she said, tapping the chain dismissively. Someone chimed in. Maybe it belonged to an old movie extra. Another joked. Smells like my grandma's attic. The necklace was passed around like a punchline. None of them knew it had been tucked safely in my drawer for over 50 years. None knew I'd last touched it in 1988. Yet I remembered everything about it. The warmth, the weight, the day it first touched my skin. After cake, Nora pulled me aside. Her smile vanished instantly. Mum, please don't bring stuff like this into my house again, she said sharply. It's embarrassing. My friends thought it was. Weird, I swallowed. The same throat that whispered lullabies into her hair now could barely form words. I'm sorry, I murmured. You always say that, she sighed. But honestly, Mom, you've been here too long. I need my space. And I need you to stop dropping by. It's time. Time. As if I were a misplaced box she could finally send back. Her eyes didn't soften. She meant every word. And for the first time in my life, I let it sink in. But long before that birthday, before the laughter, before Nora rolled her eyes at my gift, that necklace carried a story of love, loss, and betrayal she never cared to hear. And it began with a man named Adrian. Long before my daughter dismissed that necklace as some dusty relic, it lived a life full of memories, ones she never bothered to ask about. To her, it was just old metal. To me, it was the echo of a love I once believed would save me. It was the spring of 1969. The kind of season when the world still smelled faintly of recovery aftershocks of a war that had ended, that hadn't really left. I was 23, working long shifts at a roadside cafe on the outskirts of our small town. Most days we served truck drivers, traveling salesmen, and men who carried exhaustion in their posture and grease under their nails. Then one afternoon, a stranger walked in. He wasn't like the others. His clothes were neatly pressed, not wrinkled. His shoes polished, not dusty. His voice soft, not booming or crude. He asked me for directions, not coffee. His name was Adrian Harley. The next day, he returned, this time for tea. The day after that, he came back again, claiming he liked the quiet. I later learned he liked my company more than the cafe's food. He was a mechanic by trade, a wanderer by necessity, and a man with no family left to anchor him. Or so he said. Within 2 months we were married in a courthouse so small the judge doubled as the town's notary. No flowers, no guests, no photographs. Just a stamped piece of paper binding two lonely people together. We rented a cramped room above a tailor's shop. The smell of fabric dye seeped into our blankets. I cooked him soups made from bones and leftover vegetables. He brought me daisies wrapped in newspaper. Life wasn't pretty, but it was ours. Then the war drafts tightened again. Adrian didn't want to go, but choices are rarely ours to make. For nearly 2 years, I didn't know whether he was alive or a memory I'd imagined. When he finally returned, he was changed. His eyes distant, his hands colder, his voice turned inward. But I held on to him anyway. I didn't ask questions, just listened to the sound of his breathing at night to remind myself he was home. We struggled. Money slipped through our fingers like sand. I stitched dresses from curtains. He worked late shifts. We saved coins in a battered biscuit tin hidden beneath the floorboards. Then, on our 10th anniversary, he handed me a velvet box. Inside was the necklace. Gold. Emerald. Gleaming like a promise. I didn't know he still had in him. "It's yours," he said. "You always looked beautiful in green." For a moment I believed everything would be okay. But 3 months later, Adrian vanished and the necklace became the only trace of the man I once loved. What happened next carved the deepest scar of all. 3 months after Adrian gave me the necklace, 3 months after, I dared to believe he still loved me. He was gone. Not gradually. Not with signs I could have caught. He vanished the way a candle goes out. One breath, one moment, one silent extinguishing. I woke one morning to an empty side of the bed. Not unusual. Adrian often left early for work. But when I stepped into the hallway, something felt wrong. The air seemed hollow. Our small room was too still, too neat. His boots were missing. So was his jacket. The drawer he kept his things in sat open, barren. At first, I told myself he'd left early for a double shift, that he'd return late, tired and quiet like he always did. But that night came and went. And the next. And the next. By the end of the week, panic had replaced patience. I called every repair shop in 3 towns. I checked the hospitals. I even stood at the police station desk, clutching a photo of him, my voice breaking as I reported him missing. But deep down, a small voice already knew. 2 weeks later, I saw him, not in a morgue, not in a hospital bed, not returned home in tears. I saw him in the next town over, walking down the street with a woman I had never seen before. She was younger, her dress bright yellow, her laughter ringing through the air like bells. Adrian held her hand the same way he used to hold mine. He stopped to brush a strand of her hair behind her ear, a gesture so tender it sliced through me like paper. He saw me, and he did not flinch. He did not apologize. He did not call my name. He simply looked. Relieved. I didn't collapse. I didn't scream. The world did not blur. I just turned around and walked home on legs that felt made of splintered glass. When I reached our room, I opened the drawer where I kept the necklace. I held it in both hands, staring at the emerald that once symbolized hope, the gold chain that had felt like a promise, the last gift he ever gave me. I should have pawned it. I could have fed myself for months, but I couldn't bring myself to do it, because for 10 long years, I had given him everything: my youth, my trust, my hunger, my hope. And somehow, that necklace remained the only piece of him I had left that didn't feel like a lie. I placed it gently back into its velvet pouch and tucked it away, vowing never to wear it again. Years later, when my daughter Nora was born, I thought I could bury Adrian's memory. But the past has a way of resurfacing, especially when you try to pass its lessons on to someone who doesn't want them. When Nora was born, I promised myself she would never know the truth about Adrian. Not the real truth. Not the one that kept me awake for months. I didn't want her childhood shaped by betrayal or abandonment. So when she asked about her father, I told her the simplest version I could muster. He passed away when you were very little. A lie, yes, but a gentle one. A soft-edged story to protect her from the sharpness of reality. Raising her alone wasn't easy. I worked double shifts at the bakery, cleaned offices at night, and stitched clothes for neighbors just to keep the lights on. But every sacrifice felt worth it when she wrapped her tiny arms around my neck or smiled up at me with the same green eyes Adrian once had. She was everything I wasn't allowed to become: confident, outspoken, unafraid of taking up space. I encouraged it. I wanted her to stand tall in ways I never could dot as she grew. The necklace remained tucked away in its velvet pouch. Sometimes, late at night, I'd take it out just to hold it. Not because I missed Adrian, those wounds had scarred long ago, but because the necklace reminded me of a chapter of my life that was real, even if it ended badly. A reminder that once, despite everything, I had been deeply loved, or at least thought I was. I planned to give it to Nora one day. Not for its value, not for its beauty, but for the story behind it, a lesson about choosing love carefully, protecting your heart, and understanding that some memories are worth cherishing, even if the people connected to them are not. I imagined her older, maybe married, maybe with a child of her own, ready to receive something meaningful, something sacred. But Nora never cared much for sentiment. As she entered adulthood, her priorities shifted: designer bags over heirlooms, polished reputation over personal history. I noticed it, but I told myself she'd mature. That life would teach her tenderness the way it taught me resilience. I waited and waited. When she turned 30, I opened the box again. The necklace glimmered softly in my hands, untouched by time. I thought, maybe now she appreciated it. But when the day finally came, when I placed that velvet box into her manicured hands, I realized too late that she wasn't ready. Not for the gift, not for the story, not for the pieces of me I had preserved so carefully. She saw rust where I saw memory. She saw clutter where I saw history. She saw garbage where I saw a lifetime. And that was the beginning of the end. Because what happened after she tossed my past aside, what she did with that necklace, was something I never could have prepared myself for. 3 days after Nora told me to leave her home, I found myself sitting alone in a motel room that smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet. It wasn't comfortable, but it was quieter than her house had been in years. I tried not to think about the necklace. I tried not to imagine it tossed carelessly in some drawer or shoved into a bag with things she meant to donate. But fate has a bitter sense of timing. When I walked through the motel lobby one morning, a stack of glossy flyers caught my eye. On top was an invitation. Community charity brunch and auction, hosted by the Willowbrook Women's League. And beneath all the decorative lettering, I spotted her name, co-chair, Nora Harley. I nearly tossed the flyer aside, but something tugged at me. Maybe curiosity, maybe foolish hope, maybe the part of me that still believed my daughter might look at me and remember I was her mother. So I went. The event hall was bright and crowded, filled with the clinking of fancy glasses and cheerful chatter. Tables were lined with donated items: crystal bowls, knitted scarves, mismatched paintings. Most looked like things people wanted to clear out of their garages. I drifted through the crowd unnoticed as usual, until a familiar velvet box stopped me cold. Lot 52. A vintage costume necklace. I knew instantly. My breath caught in my chest. There it was, my necklace displayed under fluorescent lights like a piece of cheap memorabilia. I lifted the box gently. The emerald seemed duller than I remembered, as though it too knew it didn't belong here. A handwritten tag dangled from the clasp. Starting bid, $12. $12. For something that represented an entire decade of my life. I looked across the room and spotted Nora laughing with the mayor's wife, a glass of champagne in hand, wearing pearls she certainly didn't purchase. Not once did her eyes drift toward me, or the necklace she had thrown away without a second thought. When the auction bell rang, I returned the box to the table and stepped back. "Lot 52, the auctioneer announced. "A charming vintage necklace perfect for costume parties." My jaw tightened at the word costume. Opening bid, $12? A hand shot up. 15. Another voice. 20. Then silence until a woman in a lavender suit lifted her paddle. 40. Sold. Just like that, the necklace disappeared into a plastic bag, handed off without ceremony or hesitation. $40. $40 for the last trace of a man I once loved, and for the last piece of myself Nora never bothered to understand. I left before the brunch began. Outside, the sun was too bright, the pavement too harsh beneath my shoes. 2 blocks away, I finally let the tears fall quiet, steady, like a faucet someone forgot to shut off. But it wasn't grief that hurt the most, Dot. It was clarity. Because what Nora didn't know, what would change everything, was that the necklace she sold for $40 had once been appraised at $500,000. Back in the motel room, the silence felt thicker than the stale air. I sat on the edge of the creaking bed and stared at the peeling wallpaper, wondering how something as simple as a necklace could unravel decades of sacrifice so quickly. But then I remembered something even Nora didn't know existed. A place where the truth had been waiting. The next morning, I boarded an early bus back to the neighborhood where I once lived after Adrian left me. The buildings were older now, the paint cracked, the roof sagging like tired shoulders. But the small duplex I used to rent was still standing. Behind the main house, tucked away in a tiny side room we used to call the laundry shed, was a storage space I had kept for years. The tenant rarely used it. A faded flower pot hid the spare key exactly where I left it. Inside, dust clung to everything like a second skin. Sunlight leaked through warped wood, slicing the air into pale beams. I walked to the corner, knelt down beside the old oak dresser, and pried up the loose floorboard. Beneath it was a fireproof tin box wrapped carefully in a red scarf. My hands didn't shake. Anger has a way of steadiness. When I opened the box, the past looked back at me. Birth certificates. Lettering once sent from overseas. Still unopened, and an envelope labeled simply. Appraisal. I unfolded the brittle paper. Its edges yellowed with age. Emerald and gold custom necklace. Estimated value, $500,000, $500,000. I stared at the number until the ink seemed to blur. I remembered the day I brought the necklace to the jeweler in New York on a whim while visiting a distant cousin. The jeweler's eyes had widened instantly. "Ma'am," he had said, "this belongs in a gallery. The emerald is rare, the craftsmanship exceptional." He offered to buy it on the spot, his voice hopeful, almost pleading. But I had refused. Money wasn't what I wanted back then. The necklace symbolized a kind of love I hadn't yet admitted was an illusion, and letting it go felt like erasing the last piece of a life I fought so hard to believe in. Now the illusion was gone. The necklace was gone. And Nora, she had tossed away what she never cared to understand. It wasn't the loss of money that hurt. It was the confirmation of something I'd been too afraid to face. My daughter didn't value my past, because she didn't value me. I folded the appraisal carefully and placed it back into the tin box. A strange calm settled over me, not rage but clarity. If Nora didn't want my history, then she wouldn't inherit my future. And that clarity led me somewhere unexpected, to an attorney's office, where I rewrote everything including my will. The day after rediscovering the appraisal, something inside me finally settled. Not with bitterness, bitterness takes too much energy, but with a quiet, steady certainty. Nora had tossed away my memories, mocked my sentiment, and sold a legacy she never bothered to understand. So I made a decision. I walked to the beige brick building on Maple Avenue, with brass letters above the door that read, Harlan and Royce, Estate Planning and Elder Law inside. A receptionist with kind eyes looked up from her computer. Do you have an appointment? No, I replied. But I need to revise my will. She led me to a small office with warm lighting and an oak desk. Attorney Samuel Royce shook my hand without the condescending softness people sometimes reserve for older women. I appreciated that. He flipped through the old documents. Your daughter, Nora Harley, is listed as your sole beneficiary. Remove her, I said calmly. Remove her entirely. He didn't ask why, though his eyes softened with understanding. Who would you like to name instead? He asked. I reached into my coat and pulled out a photograph of me and Lena, my caregiver for the last several years. She'd taken care of me when I could barely stand, checked on me when my nerves trembled, and sat with me on sleepless nights without expecting a thing in return. She's the one, I said. Everything goes to her. We spent the next 2 hours drafting new documents, my house, my savings, my remaining jewelry, even the old keepsakes Nora never noticed. Samuel asked whether I wanted to leave a written statement explaining my decision. I nodded. With steady hands. I wrote, This choice was not made out of spite. It was made out of truth. Family is not defined by blood, but by presence, kindness, and respect. My daughter chose distance. Lena chose care. I leave my estate to the person who treated me with dignity in my final years. When I handed the note to Samuel, he read it silently and then placed it gently in the folder. It will be filed this week, he said. Unless you change your mind. I won't. Back in my small apartment that night, Lena brewed tea for both of us. She didn't know what I had done. She didn't need to. She simply handed me a warm cup and sat beside me, humming softly to an old song on the radio. For the first time in years, I felt complete. Not because I had taken something from Nora, but because I had finally returned something to myself, my worth. And so the story ends not with revenge, but with restoration, a reminder that the people who truly see us deserve the legacy we leave behind. If you like my story, please like this videos. Subscribe channel and comment below what kind of story you like this. I will find for you real stories.